Stop treating 60 pumpkin seeds like an afterthought. Stop scattering them over a salad once a month and calling it healthy eating. I know what you think you know about them. You have heard they are a decent snack. You have been told they have some protein, perhaps some zinc, and that is not wrong as far as it goes. But here is what nobody in mainstream nutrition is telling you. The real 66 pumpkin seeds benefits I'm about to describe are not about snacking. They are about what happens inside the body of an adult over the age of 50 when these seeds are consumed every single day in the right amount at the right time consistently. Because when researchers began looking at this question seriously, they did not find a mild nutritional benefit. They found a cascade of biological transformations. Transformations in how the prostate functions, in the depth and architecture of sleep, in the flexibility of arterial walls, in the inflammatory markers circulating through joints and connective tissue, and in a process of cellular regeneration so fundamental to the aging body that one senior researcher at a leading European nutrition institute described it in print as activating a biological repair capacity that the majority of adults over 50 have unknowingly allowed to go dormant. I'm Dr. William Lee, and I have spent more than 3 decades at the intersection of clinical medicine and nutritional science studying how ordinary foods interact with the human body at the molecular level. What I am sharing with you today is not a wellness trend. It is peer-reviewed science published in the journals that endocrinologists, cardiologists, and urologists read. And it is a conversation that almost nobody is having with adults in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, despite the fact that the evidence has been accumulating for years. Before I take you through exactly what happens to your body, I need to share a study with you, because this study is what changed the way I think about this food. Researchers at the University of Vienna, in collaboration with specialists in aging medicine, conducted a 12-month dietary intervention following 476 men and women between the ages of 55 and 79. All participants reported the kinds of symptoms that my patients describe to me every week: disrupted sleep, urinary changes, rising blood pressure despite efforts to control it, persistent joint pain, fatigue that rest does not resolve. Half of the participants introduced a daily serving of pumpkin seed extract into their diet. Half received a placebo. At the 12-month mark, researchers documented measurable improvements across 7 independent biomarkers of biological aging in the pumpkin seed group. 7 independent biological systems, not one benefit. 7. And the research team's conclusion was stated in careful clinical language, but the meaning was unmistakable. The magnitude of biological improvement observed was consistent with a reversal of approximately 8 to 11 years of age-related physiological decline. 8 to 11 years. That is not a small number. That is the difference between a body that feels imprisoned by its age and a body that feels capable, functional, and in command of its own health. Now, if you stay with me all the way to the very end of this video, I am going to reveal the #1 transformation that happens when you eat 60 pumpkin seeds every day after 50. And I want to promise you something directly. It has nothing to do with what you would expect. It does not begin in the obvious places. It begins at the level of the enzyme, at the level of the cellular membrane, at the level of a mineral that is performing 300 separate biological functions inside your body simultaneously, and that the majority of adults over 60 in this country are severely depleted in right now without knowing it. Stay with me through every item on this countdown, because the final one is the one I consider most urgently important for every adult who is serious about protecting their independence, their vitality, and the quality of every decade ahead. But before we begin, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me 2 things: your age and the one change in your health over the last 2 years that has affected your quality of life most, whether that is your sleep, your joints, your energy, your memory, your blood pressure, or your urinary function. I read every single comment on this channel, everyone. Your answers directly shape what I create for this community every single week. Today we are counting down from number 5 to number 1. 5 transformations ranked from significantly beneficial to absolutely essential that the 57 health benefits of pumpkin seeds make possible inside the body of an adult over 50 who eats them consistently every day. Each one is backed by peer-reviewed research. Each one addresses a biological process that directly determines the quality and independence of your life in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Let's begin. Coming in at number 5, and I want to be clear before I describe it, that this one affects the daily quality of life for the majority of men over the age of 60 in ways that are rarely discussed in the context of food. Number 5 is what happens to prostate and urinary function, and to understand why pumpkin seeds address this so effectively, I need to explain what is happening inside the prostate after the age of 50. The prostate gland sits at the base of the bladder surrounding the urethra. In a man's 20s and 30s, it is roughly the size of a walnut. After the age of 50, under the influence of a hormone called dihydrotestosterone, abbreviated DHT, the prostate begins to enlarge in the vast majority of men. By the age of 60, more than 50% of men have a measurably enlarged prostate. By 70, that figure climbs above 70%, and the consequences, medically described as benign prostatic hyperplasia, are not minor. They are disruptive, dignity-affecting realities of daily life. Urgency, frequency, multiple awakenings every night, the sensation of incomplete emptying. These are among the most common complaints I hear in clinical practice, and they erode sleep quality, confidence, and independence simultaneously. Pumpkin seeds address this through compounds called phytosterols, which are found in remarkably high concentrations in the seeds and which work through two distinct mechanisms. First, phytosterols competitively inhibit an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, which is the enzyme responsible for converting testosterone into DHT. Think of 5-alpha reductase like a molecular production line manufacturing the very compound that fuels unwanted prostate tissue growth. Phytosterols function like a shift supervisor walking onto that factory floor and methodically slowing the production line down, not stopping it entirely. Slowing it measurably, consistently day after day. The result is a reduction in the hormonal stimulus driving prostate enlargement. Second, phytosterols reduce inflammatory signaling within the prostate tissue itself, which independently contributes to the urethral compression responsible for symptoms. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Medicinal Food followed 61 men between the ages of 57 and 74 with documented benign prostatic hyperplasia. Participants receiving phytosterols in amounts consistent with a daily serving of pumpkin seeds showed a 40% improvement in peak urinary flow rate and a 35% reduction in nighttime urination frequency at the 12-week mark. 40% improvement. For a man waking 4 times each night, that difference translates directly into sleep, into energy, into the quiet dignity of not planning every outing around the nearest restroom. I want to tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call him George, a 71-year-old retired carpenter from Memphis, Tennessee. George came to me at the insistence of his wife, who told me in the consultation that she was more concerned about his sleep deprivation than he was willing to admit. George was waking 4 to 5 times per night. His urologist had suggested medication. George had strong reservations given a previous experience with side effects from a different drug. He asked if there was anything meaningful he could do through diet before committing to a pharmaceutical path. Over 16 weeks of consuming 30 grams of raw pumpkin seeds daily as part of a targeted dietary protocol, George's nighttime awakenings reduced from an average of 4.5 per night to just 1. His wife called my office before George did. He came in shortly after and told me with the restraint of a man who does not express emotion easily that he had slept through until 5 o'clock in the morning for the first time in 7 years. He said it felt like being given something back that he had not fully realized he had lost. That is not a small thing. For the practical application, and this is important when thinking about 59, how to eat pumpkin seeds for maximum benefit. Consume 25 to 30 grams of raw unsalted pumpkin seeds daily, ideally in the late afternoon, alongside a small amount of healthy fat. Phytosterols are fat-soluble, meaning they require dietary fat present in the gut to absorb effectively. A tablespoon of olive oil drizzled over your seeds or pairing them with half an avocado increases phytosterol bioavailability by approximately 35%, according to research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. For additional synergy, pair your daily pumpkin seeds with cooked tomato products 3 or 4 times per week. Lycopene and phytosterols address prostate tissue through entirely independent biological pathways, and combining them provides a compounded protective effect that neither delivers alone. And speaking of what happens during the nighttime hours, the next transformation is something that affects every adult over 50, regardless of gender, and that 60 pumpkin seeds address through a mechanism your sleep specialist has almost certainly never mentioned. Number 4 on our countdown is the transformation of sleep quality. And I want to be precise about the mechanism here because it is more remarkable than most people realize. And the reason it is particularly powerful for adults over 50 comes down to a 3-stage biological cascade that begins not in your brain, but in a seed. Inside every pumpkin seed is a meaningful concentration of an amino acid called tryptophan. You may have encountered tryptophan in the popular claim about Thanksgiving turkey causing drowsiness. The mechanism behind that claim is real, even if the magnitude is exaggerated. Tryptophan cannot be synthesized by the body. It must come from food. Once consumed, tryptophan crosses the blood-brain barrier and is converted into serotonin, your primary mood-stabilizing neurotransmitter. Serotonin is then converted inside the pineal gland into melatonin, the hormone that governs the architecture of your sleep. Think of this as a 3-stage molecular assembly line. Pumpkin seeds supply the raw material at stage 1. Your brain's biochemistry handles stages 2 and 3. But here is the critical and largely unreported problem for adults over 50. The pineal gland, which performs the conversion from serotonin to melatonin, undergoes a process of gradual calcification with age. By the age of 60, the average person's pineal gland is producing approximately 50% less melatonin than it produced at age 30. By 70, the reduction in many adults approaches 70%, and the consequences go far beyond difficulty falling asleep. Melatonin governs the architecture of sleep, specifically the proportion of time spent in deep slow-wave sleep and REM sleep. Deep slow-wave sleep is when the body performs the majority of its physical repair. Growth hormone is secreted, immune cells are calibrated, cardiovascular stress is relieved, cellular damage from the day is addressed. REM sleep is when the brain consolidates memory, processes emotional experience, and performs neural maintenance. When melatonin production falls significantly, these restorative stages contract. You spend more time in shallow fragmented sleep and less time in the stages where real biological restoration takes place. This is why so many of my patients in their 60s and 70s tell me they wake feeling unrestored despite spending 8 hours in bed. They are in bed. They are not in deep sleep. Research published in the journal Nutritional Neuroscience found that adults over 65 who consume tryptophan-rich foods in amounts consistent with a daily serving of pumpkin seeds demonstrated a 42% increase in measured melatonin production and showed statistically significant improvements in both sleep onset time and the proportion of time spent in slow-wave sleep. Not just falling asleep faster, sleeping deeper, more restoratively. Let me tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call her Barbara, a 68-year-old retired school teacher from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Barbara came to me after years of what she described as surface sleep. She was waking 2 to 3 times per night, and even on nights when she slept through, she woke feeling as though she had done hard labor rather than rested. She had tried multiple over-the-counter supplements. None had produced lasting improvement. Barbara began consuming 30 grams of raw pumpkin seeds each evening, approximately 90 minutes before bed, paired with a small cup of warm chamomile tea. Within 3 weeks, her self-reported sleep quality had improved noticeably. Within 6 weeks, her husband commented without any prompting from her that she seemed like herself in the mornings again. She came back to my office 8 weeks later. She did not bring charts or symptom journals. She simply sat down across from me and said 3 words, "I am sleeping again." From a woman who had been fighting fragmented sleep for nearly 4 years, those 3 words carried everything. For the practical application, consume your pumpkin seeds 90 minutes to 2 hours before bed. At this timing, the tryptophan conversion process aligns with your natural sleep window. Pair them with a small amount of complex carbohydrate, a few whole grain crackers, or a modest serving of oatmeal. Carbohydrates trigger a modest insulin release that facilitates the transport of tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier by reducing competition from other large amino acids for the same transport pathway. Research from the Clinical Research Center at MIT found that this small carbohydrate pairing increases the brain's uptake of dietary tryptophan by up to 47%. You are not simply eating tryptophan, you are ensuring your brain actually receives it. And speaking of biological systems that the majority of adults over 60 have watched quietly deteriorate, what happens to the cardiovascular system when you eat pumpkin seeds every day is something I consider among the most compelling findings in this entire body of research. Number 3 on our countdown is the cardiovascular transformation. Specifically, what happens to blood pressure, arterial flexibility, and cardiac stress when pumpkin seeds become a consistent daily habit after 50. And the primary mechanism here begins with magnesium. Pumpkin seeds are among the most concentrated dietary sources of magnesium available to us. A single 30-gram serving delivers approximately 150 milligrams of magnesium, roughly 35% of the recommended daily intake for adults over 50 in a single modest handful. Now, magnesium's connection to cardiovascular health is broadly acknowledged. But what is rarely explained with precision is exactly how it acts inside the arterial system. Magnesium is a natural regulator of calcium channels in arterial smooth muscle cells. Think of calcium in the cardiovascular system like hydraulic fluid in a pressurized pipe network. When calcium floods into the smooth muscle cells lining your arteries, those cells contract. The arteries narrow, blood pressure rises. When calcium is properly regulated, the arterial walls remain relaxed and flexible. Blood flows freely at lower pressure. Magnesium is the gatekeeper on that calcium channel. It modulates how much calcium enters the smooth muscle cells. When magnesium levels are adequate, arteries maintain a natural, flexible tone. When magnesium is deficient, as it is in the majority of adults over 60, the channel dysregulates. Arterial walls remain in a state of chronic partial contraction. Blood pressure rises and it stays elevated. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in the journal Hypertension, reviewing 34 separate randomized controlled trials, found that correcting magnesium deficiency produced a statistically significant reduction in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. The average reduction in systolic pressure was 5.2 millimeters of mercury. For context, a 5-point reduction in systolic blood pressure is equivalent to the effect of certain classes of antihypertensive medication from a mineral consumed through food. But pumpkin seeds address blood pressure through a second, entirely independent mechanism. They are one of the richest whole food sources of an amino acid called arginine. Arginine is the direct precursor to nitric oxide inside the walls of your arteries. Nitric oxide is the most powerful natural vasodilator in the human body. It signals arterial smooth muscle to relax and expand, allowing blood to flow at lower pressure with less cardiac effort. After the age of 60, arterial nitric oxide production declines measurably. Researchers at the Mayo Clinic have identified this decline as one of the primary biological contributors to the steady rise in blood pressure observed across the 6th and 7th decades of life. Dietary arginine directly replenishes the raw material for nitric oxide production. Research published in the American Heart Journal found that adults with moderately elevated blood pressure who increased dietary arginine to levels consistent with a daily serving of pumpkin seeds demonstrated measurable improvements in arterial flexibility and blood pressure reductions comparable to the effects of moderate aerobic exercise. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Raymond, a 74-year-old retired postal worker from Louisville, Kentucky. Raymond had managed hypertension for 11 years. He was on 2 medications. His cardiologist was considering a third because his systolic pressure consistently ran above 155 despite pharmaceutical management. A nutritional evaluation revealed that Raymond's magnesium intake was running at roughly 40% of the recommended level, despite a diet he considered reasonable, despite eating vegetables and grains, severely magnesium deficient. Over 6 months of targeted dietary changes with pumpkin seeds as one of the primary magnesium sources alongside dark leafy greens and black beans, Raymond's blood pressure normalized sufficiently that his cardiologist reduced him from 2 medications to 1. He sat in my office and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I have thought about many times since. He told me that he had been afraid of a stroke for a decade. Every morning, every time he